Right, we can speak now to Neama Rahmani, former US federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get on to this morning's proceedings. Not really the trial proper, but they were considering this gagging order. Donald Trump making social media posts that the prosecution argue break that gagging order. Talk us through it. What do you make of it?
Well, Donald Trump has violated the gag order at every possible turn. And the question is Judge Merchan actually going to enforce that order, put some teeth into it? Every judge that has presided over one of Donald Trump's trials has really been all bark, no bite. In the civil fraud case, for instance, Judge Engoron fined Trump $5,000 and $10,000. But that's not a lot of money for someone like Donald Trump. And if those types of nominal fines are imposed today, I expect Trump's behavior to continue.
So what, if that is the case, that's certainly what the prosecution are arguing here. Donald Trump argues and sees it differently. His defense lawyers in court arguing that his comments weren't specifically about the trial. They were responding to criticism that he had received. And we understand, I think the judge isn't going to make a ruling on it immediately. But if you are convinced that the prosecution is right, why would the judge not just enforce those fines and enforce the order?
The issue is holding Donald Trump in contempt and potentially jailing him. Now, that would be obviously unprecedented. It may lead to civil unrest. But after a certain point, when Trump's violations of these orders continue, and it's clear that they're intentional and that they're going to occur on a daily basis, the judge has to do something if he's really going to protect the integrity of these proceedings.
I see. Well, we know that stage, that kind of admin process has finished. Donald Trump is back in the courtroom. We're looking now at the next phase, the continuation of the first witness in this trial. Talk us through the significance here.
David Pecker was the prosecution's first witness, and it was an interesting choice. I understand how the state wants to present this case chronologically, and he, of course, being the head of the National Enquirer, was the first contact with Stormy Daniels and her team. The issue with his testimony, though, is he's an alleged co-conspirator in this criminal activity, and he's testifying under a grant of immunity. So the defense is going to be able to come after him and say that this is all made up and that this is perjured testimony to save himself, and that he's doing it to try to sell more magazines. So the cross-examination of this witness is going to be very interesting.
Interesting. Well, that should be coming up. What do you make overall of the state of this trial, how it's been handled so far?
So far, things are moving as I expected. It's really interesting how the prosecution is framing this as a conspiracy, even though conspiracy hasn't been charged, really trying to show that Donald Trump tried to mislead the American voters during the 2016 presidential election. Of course, that's important because that's how you get the false business records to be a felony under New York law. If they're not in furtherance of or to cover up another crime, they're just misdemeanors. And of course, we knew that the defense was going to come out aggressively and attack the credibility of Michael Cohen, who's the state's star witness, and Stormy Daniels. But something interesting came out during their opening statement yesterday. They talked about Donald Trump's accountant and how he booked these payments to Michael Cohen. I think the defense is going to try to pin this case on him and make him the fall guy.
Interesting. Just for people who aren't in the US, that difference there that you mentioned between misdemeanor and felony, just explain that for us.
Of course, each state's laws are unique. So, for instance, we don't have cameras because New York is one of 2 states that doesn't allow cameras in the courtroom. And under New York law, false business records are just a misdemeanor, so not a serious violation. So if Trump paid Michael Cohen $420,000 and booked it as a legal expense when it wasn't, that's just a misdemeanor. But it can become a felony, which is a more serious charge if the false business records were in furtherance of or to cover up another crime. That's why the prosecution is arguing that those records were actually an unlawful campaign finance contribution or an attempt to mislead the American public during the 2016 election. So because that's a separate crime, that would be a felony.
Neama Rahmani, thank you very much for coming on the programme and talking us through your analysis of those proceedings so far. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure.